Hi, this is Shad with LoveToCode.com. In this video, we'll learn how to use Java and JDBC to connect to a database. We'll first start off by defining what JDBC is, then we'll cover the features, database support, we'll also look at the architecture, and also cover the development process. So what exactly is JDBC? JDBC allows a Java application to connect to a relational database. The major databases are supported such as Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, and so on. The main feature of JDBC is that it's a standard API. You develop your application code to the JDBC API, and you can connect to various databases. There's no need to develop different code for different databases. That's the main advantage of JDBC. JDBC is also a call-level interface that supports ANSI SQL. You simply provide SQL statements to the JDBC driver, and it'll pass those on to the actual database. You can also build your own custom SQL statements, so you can make use of SQL inserts, selects, updates, and deletes. You can also build your custom SQL queries with inner and outer joins. You can also call store procedures on the database if you need to. Here's a nice graphic of the databases supported by JDBC. As you can see, the major database servers are supported. The JDBC architecture includes a key component, and that's the JDBC driver. This driver provides the critical link between your Java application and the database. The JDBC driver converts the standard API calls to low-level calls for your specific database. Your database vendor normally provides the JDBC driver file for you. You can simply visit your database vendor's website and search for JDBC driver. Another key player is the driver manager. The driver manager helps connect an app to a database based on a database connection string. The current version of JDBC is 4.0. With this latest version, the driver manager will automatically load drivers that are in the application's class path, so there's no additional work required to load the driver. However, there are some legacy JDBC 3.0 drivers, and they have to be explicitly loaded with Java code. So you may see some code out there with class.4 name. That's legacy code. We no longer need that with JDBC 4.0. The JDBC API is defined in two packages, java.sql and javax.sql. The key classes in the API are driver manager, connection, statement, result set, and also data source, which is primarily used for connection pooling. Let's go over the actual development process. Basically, the first thing you need to do is get a connection to a database, and then from there you need to create a statement object. Then we'll execute a SQL query, and finally we'll process a result set. All right, so let's take a look at the first step. So in order to connect to a database, we need to find the database. Remember, it could be a local database or somewhere on the network. So we use a similar approach of finding a web resource, and that's via URL. So we make use of a JDBC URL. So this is effectively the connection string. The basic syntax is JDBC : a driver subprotocol : driver connection details. On this slide, I'll show you some examples for SQL Server, Oracle, and MySQL. Now we have enough background information to get a connection. In this example, I'm going to define variables for the database URL, the user ID, and the password. Then we'll make use of driver manager get connection based on these variables. If everything is successful, then we get a valid connection object. If there's a failure, it could throw an exception, like a SQL exception or a class not found exception. Now that we have a connection, we can move on to step 2, create statement. I'll make use of that myCon object, and I'll say myCon.createStatement. It returns a statement object, and this is the basic object that we'll use later on for executing SQL statements. In step 3, we use the statement object to execute a SQL query. So in this example, I'll say myStatement.executeQuery, select star from employees. This will return a result set. So remember, we can pass in any SQL query that supports ANSI SQL. In this example, the SQL string is hard-coded, but you can also pass in a string object that you build dynamically. For step 4, we'll process the result set. The cursor is initially positioned before the first row in the result set. We can make use of the resultSet.next method to move the cursor forward one row. This method also returns true or false if there are more rows to process. So we can use this in a loop to process each row in the result set, while myrs.next read data from each row. When we are in the loop, we can retrieve data using getter methods. We can look up the data based on the column name or the column index. It's important to note that the column index is 1-based. In this example, we are printing out the last name and first name for each row in the result set. So I'll have this while myrs.next. I can say print line, myrs get string last name, myrs get string first name. So that's the basic process to execute a query with JDBC. So let's just recap the development process. Step 1 is getting a connection to a database. Step 2, we create a statement. Step 3, we execute the query. Step 4, we process the result set. We covered JDBC at a high level. In the following tutorials, we'll get our hands dirty and actually run Java code. But for now, we have a firm foundation on the theory. So we have a lot of tutorials that go into the gory details of JDBC. For example, details on how to create tables and add sample data, how to configure the JDBC driver in your Java IDE, how to connect to the database to perform select, insert, updates, and deletes, also advanced features like store procedures, transactions, and much more. All right, so that wraps up our discussion on JDBC overview.